Hello, I'm your host for this segment of GGG Insights. I'm Arthur Melman. With me today is Manny Vilar, who is one of the candidates for town board this fall, but he's also run for supervisor and other positions. And what we're going to be doing in this series of GGG Insight shows is talking about the bigger picture, the future of East Hampton, the challenges, the problems, and the opportunities. We're going to have a lot of different kinds of people in our shows. We're going to have government people, we're going to have clergy, we're going to have students, we're going to have farmers, fishermen, technical people. And we want to get all of these ideas on the table so we can have a very interesting discussion now and in the fall about where East Hampton is and is going. And Manny, why don't you give everybody a little bit of a background about yourself? I mean, it's not the usual guy who grew up here and became a farmer or a fisherman.
Absolutely. Grew up in East Hampton. Started out as the proverbial, second summer home kid. My dad was a cement mason. Was a union cement mason, United Cement Masons and Plasterers in the city in Nassau, Suffolk County. My grandfather was one of the founding members of the United Cement Masons. I think it's local 780. My mom worked for Bohax. Both
I remember that name.
Yeah, both up
shows you
Island,
how old I am.
both up Island and here in East Hampton prior to its closing. So I really have very humble beginnings. Like I said, spent my childhood on up in East Hampton. Have always been an East Hampton resident. Worked as a commercial fisherman for a short time to help pay my way through college.
Okay.
I know what it's like to be out at dragger in the middle of the winter.
Okay.
Pinhook porgies.
You got me. I missed that segment of your bio.
Pinhook porgies. Helped pay my way through college. I ran for East Hampton Town Bay Constable at one point, was elected, was one of the last duly elected Bay Constables in the state, myself and Jeff Havlick. Ultimately left that to take a job with the State Park Police and have been there ever since. In 1992, got promoted to sergeant and was transferred into New York City. So I worked in the confines of the 30th Precinct in Harlem, in Spanish Harlem area of New York City.
What was your park in the city of New York?
Riverbank State Park we had.
Oh, that's over the
sewage treatment plant.
Sewage treatment plant.
Also worked in the South Bronx in the confines of the 4-6 in the Morris Heights section of the South Bronx.
So you had all the cushy positions over the septic system and in the South Bronx.
Absolutely.
I mean, you must have known somebody to get these positions.
Yes, I have. I like the country western song. It's I have friends in low places. Clearly. Was there for 8 years. Commuted back and forth.
It's a long commute.
Eventually, it was a very, very long commute. Eventually, was able to get a transfer back out onto the island, and have risen to the rank of now first sergeant, which is the highest ranking supervisor in the field, with overall supervision of all patrols and lower level supervisors on Long Island for the State Park Police. Always been involved on a union side of things.
That's from your father, I guess.
Yeah, my father, my grandfather, more my grandfather, but my dad as well. Always been involved on a union side of things. Got very involved with a union that we had back in the late 80s. It was called Council 82. Quickly realized they did a horrible job. Tried a decertification attempt, organizing the members to decertify from AFSCME AFL-CIO. Failed horribly. Failed horribly. Ultimately to try again in 2010 and be successful, and creating the 5th largest police union outside of the New York City police unions, of course, the 5th largest police union in the state of New York, behind the Troopers, Nassau, Suffolk, and Port Authority Police.
So you've seen this from all angles. What do you think one or two of the biggest problems, opportunities, challenges we have out here, Manny? You've obviously thought a lot about this as you've run for different offices, and you've lived out here.
Every community has challenges, and we're very, very fortunate.
And opportunities.
And opportunities, right. What challenges comes opportunities. One door closes, another one opens. At least if you're an optimistic guy like me. And we've been very fortunate through the years. We've had, and continue to have, people that have run for town government, that have been in town government, that are all dedicated and have all wanted to do what's right and good for the town to try and better everybody. And that's our current town board right now. All good people. Everybody's really, really trying. But what everybody brings to the plate is their experiences that they have. You know, my experience isn't that, I don't want to say it's a small pond, but it isn't the pond of local town government. My experience is a much bigger pond, dealing in state government, state legislature, dealing with state policy. As a matter of fact, I just wrote a letter today to the East Hampton Star dealing with policy changes proposed by the governor to workmen's compensation law and how that's going to have an adverse effect on mental health, if mental health provide
I
for
think, I think it's fair to say that for a lot of us, state government is this amorphous blob, and we have no idea what happens in the halls of the state legislature or the governor's office, how they react. I mean, this is just something that's not in our viewfinder here.
No, you know, and you wouldn't have that kind of experience unless you're involved in it. Like
I'm saying that because I think in some ways maybe the town could do better if it understood better what the state had to offer and how to extract what the town needs from the state. I don't.
Absolutely. There are many ways to navigate state government, the state agencies, and it's understanding the way the state agencies work as they relate to the executive, you know, the governor's office, the executive branch, and the state legislature, understanding state policy. I'll use the example of what happened in spring school. What a quirk, literally, was a quirk, and when they were completing the application, they were denied funds to improve their septic system.
Well, I remember there was something about that.
It was the spelling of Ecobonic Harbor, and DEC promptly denied the funds. But
I'm not sure I can spell Ecobonic Harbor.
but
I won't ask you.
Yeah, but no, I can spell it. But what happens is understanding the way DEC works and why they use that misspelling to deny the funds. It's understanding state division of budget and ultimately getting the governor's office to intervene. Now, the governor's office did intervene, thank goodness, and the funds have been appropriated as they should have been right from the get-go. But these are the kind of things that, you know, sometimes filling out an application or having a professional firm fill out an application for you doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be received in state government. You know, there's got to be legwork with this, because you got to remember, that application is one of many. Somebody's not going to get the money.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure, you want to, I'm going to use a naughty word, lobby, but you want to make sure you lobby and you know who you're lobbying and who you're talking to and how you make things work, as opposed to the tail wagging the dog. You want the dog wagging the tail.
Well, Manny, I don't know. This is really a question because I really don't know the answer to it. Does the town of East Hampton have a specialist in state government inside the town? I mean,
No.
What do we have, like 75?
No, I can tell you, no. They have no one. They haven't had anybody for years.
I mean, I'm involved in some institutions, and one of the things we do is we seek grants. So we have a professional grant writer who knows how to spell Ecobonic.
Right.
It would seem to me with the panoply of funds and agencies up in Albany, you know, there should be somebody in the town of East Hampton who, as a full-time job or as a major segment of their time, is focused on accessing those funds and filling out these grant requests.
Absolutely, even in legislation. I mean, like I said it's a naughty word, lobbyist. And yes, I am a registered lobbyist because it's part of my job is being on the PBA.
When I say that, I don't mean that just somebody who sits down in in town hall and reads all of the material. I mean somebody who gets on some means of communication, transportation rather, goes up to Albany and walks around and says hello to people. So when the guy here in East Hampton has a question, he doesn't call the 800 number, he calls Charlie, who doesn't give him special service, but he knows who to call to get the answer to the question. I mean, I just can't imagine trying to fill out some of these applications without having some help.
That is.
And these people usually want to help you if you know the right person to
You're
ask.
exactly correct, and that's exactly my point. And that's experience that comes with having a broader, bigger understanding of government and the way government works and the inner workings of government that you don't get from a school board or being on a town board or being in private business. You need to be involved on that. You need to be involved on that level. You know, when we think of town government, and this goes circle back to your first part of the question. When we think of town government's a huge employer.
Oh, yeah.
A huge employer.
Well, we have about 75 to 85 people.
I believe with seasonal part-time staff,
that makes it bigger.
I think it's somewhere around 600 employees.
Oh, really?
It's a huge employer, but yet,
If you back up the seasonal people,
you need to have somebody that has, or somebody in town government should have, a real firm understanding of labor relations and human resources.
Now, who would that be? Would that be Manny Vilar?
Well, in this case, I would say, yeah, that would be Manny Vilar, having a 1,500-man police union and dealing with civil service, division of budget, all the various state agencies, DEC, parks, the state university system. You know, dealing with PERB. I mean, like I'm a regular at the Public Employees Relation Board. I've come in and testified for other unions as an expert witness as to the tail law and the application of certain provisions of it.
So what you're really saying is, and I really haven't thought of this until you brought it up, we have a lot of people in town government who have served on the planning board, the zoning board, really worked their butts off, but they really haven't had experience with other levels of government with which it's necessary for the town to interact and to understand how that interaction, because of the regulatory environment and also because of the grant making. And I guess that goes for the federal government as well as the state government. And we don't really have any, I'm just trying to think, this town board, the last town board, or the town board before that really had nobody with that skill set.
No, we don't. We haven't had that for years.
And I don't think we had anybody in town government as an employee of the town board who really had that skill set to deal with the other levels of government.
No, and we haven't. We relied on private vendors, private contractors, whatever you want to call them. You know, the town has a very good labor attorney, Vince Toomey. No relation to Toomey, Tom Toomey, or at least I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
But you know, they rely on different people. But you know, it's like anything else. It's one thing when you rely on someone. It's another thing when you have someone do the job and you have a good understanding of the job they're doing.
I think it's impossible to really employ a consultant properly unless you understand what the consultant is doing. I mean, it's like taking, Kim Shaw heads natural resources. It's like asking me with no natural resources background to hire a natural resources consultant because I wouldn't even know the right words.
Correct. And you know, to try and circle this back, you're right. Like Kim Shaw, she does an outstanding job. And she does an outstanding job, and she comes from a local family, which I think is a component of being on a town board. You know, if you didn't grow up out here, you know, and you didn't have any extended involvement in the local community, you really don't know where we came from and where, you know, and the question is, where are we headed? But, you know, you can only head in a direction if you only understand when you came from. I mean, I always say it should be mandatory reading for anybody that gets on town board to read the East Hampton history by Jeanette Rattray and to read Men's Lives by Peter Matheson. They should read both books. They should, from cover to cover, and when they're done, they should be putting footnotes in each book to understand, so they know what the difference is between the round swamp lesters and the posy lesters. Understand where this community's come from. To our town workforce, where, as of last year, from what I was told, our town workforce is making 30% less than the surrounding municipalities, which is why we have a constant retention problem. People come in, they get experience, and they leave.
Yeah.
Well, when that happens, you lose institutional knowledge because your senior most employees are the people that have been here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They have institutional knowledge that they've garnered away. They remember the decision that was made 20 years ago, or why the decision, more importantly, why something was made a certain way or done a certain way.
The whole code enforcement department has basically disappeared.
Has disappeared, correct. So,
because I know somebody asked a question about why don't you send somebody from code enforcement out earlier, and there's nobody there.
right,
But Manny, let me ask you this. I never really focused on this before. Why does the town of East Hampton pay less than the town of Southampton for a similar position? Or
well,
is
I've written about this and I've spoken about this many times. There's a conventional wisdom, I should say conventional. There is a thinking, depending on what side of the negotiation table you're on, where you need to reduce the cost of living to the taxpayers at all costs. Flat out, straight away, that's salary and benefits, you need to reduce that cost. What's flawed in that thinking is there's a behind this curtain, there's a behind cost that you need to calculate into that. And the cost is when you're going to get something approved before a planning board or a zoning board or building inspectors or some other inspectors or dealing with some other level of government, the ability of that employee to have the experience and the expertise to help you, to be able to process you, there's a cost with that. There's a cost in that employee recycling through and having to retrain that employee. There's a cost associated to you, the taxpayer. That's that hidden cost. And every time your representative, if it's a big project, if it's a small project, you might be doing it yourself, but you're still taking a day off from work. There's all these costs that are associated with that. Good government functions best when it's good government. And good government means you need to have a living wage. Now, I know that's a very progressive term. It's thrown out all the time. And you know what? Look, I'm running as a Republican and conservative. Am I a traditional Republican and conservative? No, I'm not. You know what? I'm a regular guy. I'm down to earth. I'm realistic. In my business, on the PBA side of things, I endorse candidates from all sides of the table. I'll tell everybody right now, vote for Tom DiNapoli, New York State Controller, Democrat, because he's a good man. I know the guy for 30 years. He does an outstanding job. He's fighting diversification of the pension system, which is a whole nother thing that I could probably spend a half hour on. So we need to circle back, we need to provide a living wage to our in-town employees. Now, what is a living wage?
I don't know. That's
well, this is the dynamic. We have.
If I'm the employee, living wage is more than I make.
We have to understand what the problem really is. Is it a housing crisis? Is it a tax problem? Well, it's a cost of living problem, and that's really what we have. And we have to understand why we have a cost of living problem. And this goes to the heart of your question. This is the biggest, probably the most, because it will impact everything else in the town of East Hampton moving forward into the future, is cost of living. So to address that, we need to understand why we have a cost of living. We're blessed. We live in an incredible community, framed by the ocean and the bay, beautiful beaches, plenty of open space that's been preserved, in part thanks to Perry Duryea and Jay Schneiderman. You got to give the man credit where credit's due. Both gentlemen, they preserved, I believe, more open space than any two people combined, particularly Perry Duryea, who was Speaker of the Assembly, the last Republican Speaker of the Assembly. But we have to understand this beautiful area attracts a lot of people, and attracts a lot of people with an income potential far, far greater than we can produce here. We cannot match the salaries that are paid on the west end of the island or in New York City. I shouldn't even say the west end of the island, but that New York City centric circle. We can't match those salaries. But yet those salaries and that buying potential is being transposed in the second homeowner and the people that are coming here. And that's not a bad thing in of itself.
Yeah.
That's good for the economy. It's good for it's good for everybody. But it drives up the cost of housing. In the process of driving up the cost of housing, it also drives up the cost of everything else. For what you pay to a gallon of gasoline to what you pay for a loaf of bread, it drives up the cost of everything.
Yeah.
Now you have an income inequity. I know, I sound I keep hearing this. You sound so much like a Democrat.
Okay.
Well, you know what? It's just things are what they are. You know, you have a salary inequity that you need to figure out how you're going to address, that cost of living. If it was a simple answer, I would have the answer for you. It's not. But we as a town government need to be real about this. We could build tomorrow 500 housing units. Government could build 500 housing units tomorrow. We still have a housing crisis, and we still have a cost of living crisis. It's not going to lower down the price of bread. It's not going to lower anybody's property taxes. It's not going to do anything that makes the town unaffordable for our seniors that have been here their entire lives, for retirees that maybe retired and moved out here 10, 15 years ago that are now finding it that are on fixed pensions that all of a sudden realize with devaluation over time. So it's not going to fix all those problems. So we need to think outside of the box. We need to look at, try and find, we use this term in union business, similarly situated environments. We need to find out, and we need to look at other environments, other communities, other governments that are similarly situated to us.
Yeah, I
and
know.
we need to figure out how we're going to address this. First comes to mind is the Cape, which has a Boston crowd with the income potential of the Boston community coming out to the Cape, driving up prices of home. What are they doing? I don't know what they're doing, but I think we need to explore these. We need to explore options. What we can't do is we can't use the same old out-of-the-box conventional thinking that we used in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s and think it's going to work, because it's not going to.
Yeah. No, I hadn't really thought about the overall cost of living out here, because I guess to some degree people out here say, well, let's try to hire a code enforcement official. How much does he make in Patchogue? Patchogue doesn't have the influx of wealthy
Correct.
New York City people who drive up the prices of bread in
Right.
Patchogue.
Correct.
So it's a whole different thing.
It's an entirely
it just
different
never
dynamic.
occurred to me that we're paying substantially less to people than in Southampton, because I can't understand why. I mean, this is not a
Again, it's
yeah.
in a bubble. If East Hampton was no different than Islip, no different than Elmira, no different than any other community, you know what? Things wouldn't deviate all that much. But East Hampton's not. We're not in a bubble. Or maybe, I guess we are in a bubble
We think we're in a
because we
bubble.
are different than everybody else. But we need to recognize that, and we need to address those issues. And those are the issues we go, we don't want to do anything that's going to impede the price of homes.
Sure.
We don't want to do that. We want home values to continue to go up. We don't want to do anything that's going to diminish the quality of life in East Hampton, that's going to drive people away, that's going to drive our tourism and second homeowner economy. So we don't want to do those things, but we need to find a way in which our local community, this is the plumber, the landscaper, the school teacher, the cop, the volunteer, more importantly, those people also are the retirees, the volunteer fireman and ambulance person, the Kiwanis, the Lions, the Rotary, all the organizations that do so much tremendous good in our community that, you know, you can't thank them in a half hour. There's
sure.
so many of them.
I guess one of the things that, you know, occurs to me was, I guess, old Henry Ford decided to pay his workers more so they can afford to buy his automobiles. And maybe he was also able to keep some of those workers with their institutional knowledge of how to put the chassis together with the whatever wheel or anything like that.
Right.
And I guess I hadn't, and quite frankly, nobody who's been on our programs so far has just pointed out, and I assume it's correct, this 20 or 30% disparity between what people can make for a position here as Southampton, because it, quite frankly, to me, makes no sense. I mean, granted, somebody might like the Bay here better than the Bay in Southampton, but my guess is not that much.
Right.
If
You know, and I'll use this example. I happen to be reading an article about the, not to go in national politics, and I'm not, but I'm reading an article about, I guess Paul Manafort had a house in Bridgehampton. And from 2010 to 2014, he paid his landscaper, a local landscaper, $400,000 to do landscaping.
nice
Now,
house.
really, in reality, in 1997, I built my house, bought the property and built my house. It's a nice size house. I mean, I had 6 kids, so I had to have a decent
Manny,
house.
I'd love to talk to you more. I'm looking at my clock, and we have 10 seconds to thank you.
Oh.
But I think this whole idea of not only affordable housing, but the cost of living out here has got to be something we spend more time on. And I really thank you for bringing this up.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much for
much.
having me. I look
Okay.
forward to coming back.
Okay, we'd like to have
All
you
right.
back.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. I really, you know.